Hello, and welcome to the Fast Forward Amy Show, the show where we talk about how you can live your life and business with simple strategies. I'm Fast Forward Amy, your host and coach, and I'll bring you a new episode every Tuesday. Before we dive deep into this camera confidence tips episode, I want to tell you that as always, you will find all of these tips on my website, which means if you go to fastforwardamy.com/56, you can find the full recap with all of the tips we're going to be talking about and the other resources. You can find the link in the description of this episode. And to top that off, I've created something very special for you, namely a new video training, which is all about how you can create really great Instagram stories. And you can grab that for free, and it has a much higher value than free, through fastforwardamy.com/spot on stories. So if you want to really captivate your audience, but also first and foremost get confident enough to get on Instagram stories and to start talking, I got you with that training. Just click the link in the description and go and grab your downloadable training. Okay, let's get into it. This is a whole long episode about camera confidence, which is difficult, because I remember when I first did a presentation, which has nothing to do with actually getting on camera. I think I was about 11 years old, and I had to do it in front of my class at school, which is like 20 students looking at you, all other 11-year-olds. And the thing is, my parents used to be in public speaking and everything, so I felt quite a lot of pressure to be really good at that. I am also a high achieving type A perfectionist person, so not good for a kid. I think I had fear of failure when I was 6 years old already, so thank God I got to evolve from that early on. But bringing it back, I'm 11 years old. I'm doing this in front of the class, and I'm talking about the European Space Agency. I had prepped, and I was so nervous. I was stuttering the entire time. I got red, I got flustered, I forgot a bunch of the stuff I was going to say, and I did not ace it whatsoever. On the contrary, I really, really failed, actually. And over the years in high school, sometimes you got to do something in front of the class. And I was always nervous, but I kept getting better at it. Up until a point, I think it was when I was 17, my English teacher was looking for students who wanted to compete in the BBC Public Speaking Awards, which was for people my age. And she kind of enrolled me in it. I don't really know how that happened, but I was always into public speaking. I just wasn't amazing at it, but I kept just growing over the years and kept getting better and better at talking. Side note, as a kid, I always talked a lot, and to the great, well, my brothers were not always amused. Let me just keep it at that. But my mom always says, what you're really good at as a kid, you grow up to be doing as your job. So, for example, for us, that means my oldest brother was always great with Lego. He's now an engineer. My brother Matthew was really good at drawing and everything. He's now a photographer. My little brother Lawrence was always really good at singing lyrics. He's now a DJ. I was good at talking. Now we're here in the Fast Forward Amy Show. So I got better at talking. The BBC Public Speaking Awards really helped me. I didn't get really far, but it was incredibly nerve-wracking. Is that how you say it? And I learned a lot from it. Not only did my English teacher help me, but my mom kind of coached me through it as well. And she's actually also the person who helped me prepare for this episode to write down some camera confidence tips. So fast forward many years later, and actually, so that means 2 years ago, I went to LA for a public speaking training because I knew how important it was to be really good at that. And it is one of my big goals to get on stages worldwide and to impact millions of people all over the world. And that means I needed to get good at public speaking. So I flew to LA, did a 2-day training that cost me $2,000 and learned a lot from that as well. But you learn the most from doing it and continuously doing it. And when I look back on videos from even a few years ago, I cringe, but I also don't, because I know we all got to start somewhere. And I remember back then, so this is a few years ago, let's say 3 years ago, maybe, when I started making videos, I used to look at videos from other people like Emery Forleo, And I used to think like, oh my God, she does that so good. And I want my videos to look like her videos. But she had a professional team. She had someone for the lights, the audio, video, a professional setup, hair and makeup, and all of that. And I was like, well, I can't do that right now. And as I'm saying this, it's really funny because I'm sitting here right now. My hair, I didn't do that. My face, I didn't do that. None of this setup was done by me. I am now in a professional setting. Took me a few years to get here though. But those things you can't really learn. There's a time when you can start investing in the equipment you use, but practicing speaking and being able to create a video of 20, 30, 40 minutes without actually stopping or having to redo a lot of stuff, that's not because of the setup. That's because of all of the hours and hours and hours I've practiced over the years. So today I want you to listen closely to the tips because these are tips that my parents have put into my head from when I was 10 years old, maybe, that I've invested a lot of money in, a lot of time in, and that I've practiced that a lot. And I'm still not perfect because as I'm doing this, I'm moving my hands, I'm breaking a ton of rules, but you can't get too self conscious. I'm just going to go through the tips and I hope you like them. And remember what I said, this is camera confidence. So just going to talk about getting on camera. But if you want to specifically learn how to get on video for Instagram stories and make that really good and create great, captivating Instagram stories, get the Spot on Stories training that you can find in the link in the description and always in the resources of the episode as well. Okay, so let's get started with these tips after my long ass intro. You know, by the way, when you say swear words and you curse a lot in your podcast, you have to list it as explicit content. So literally every one of my episodes is unfortunately listed as explicit content. I'm going to go through 11-ish tips. And the first one is smile. You can practice this in the mirror, and I like to look at that as smiling into the camera is so important. And in the beginning, it feels kind of unnatural, but after a while, you get used to it. You could even bring people bad news with still a gentle, comforting smile. You can always basically smile in a video, and it is much nicer for people to look at a smiling person than a non smiling person. Makes sense because if you would walk into a store or pass someone on the street, if they're smiling at you, that's also a lot nicer than if they would be looking at you with like a blank face. So smiling in the camera is really important, as well as the fact that you want to focus on one spot. So for me right now, that's looking into the lens. When you are creating stories or something, it could be looking in the lens or at a certain point at your screen, but be really specific when you are talking. Focus on one spot when you are in front of the camera. Your facial expression. I have I guess, a little bit of luck that I have a lot of expression in my face and I can portray my emotions easily and like convey a lot of my message through my face. But your body language overall is hugely important in what you're saying. If I would just be talking all the time like this, you wouldn't really be listening to me, would you? If I would talk without any intonation, without any gestures, without any facial expressions, it would be really boring to listen to me. And I hope by infusing intonation in my voice, by really adding facial expressions, by smiling, that it becomes a lot more fun for you to look at me on YouTube or wherever you're looking or listen to me on a podcast or whatever. And what's really special there is when you're on the phone with someone, they can also tell if you're smiling or not. So when you are on a sales call, for example, it's also really important to match the facial expressions with the message you actually want to convey to people. Super important for me as well. When I'm creating a course and I am recording voiceovers over slides, I'll still do it smiling, and you can tell when I didn't do it like that. Sometimes people in my staff, they create tutorials for our tech vault, and I'll listen to them and I'll be like, I like what you did, but you weren't smiling, so please record it again while you're smiling. I know, I'm a bitch. So we had smiling, focusing on one spot, adding a lot of facial expression, and then we have hand gestures. And there you found my weak spot, as you can tell. It's really important to find a safe spot for your hands. So when you are standing, just keep them next to your body. When you are, like me, sitting at a table, find one safe spot so that when you are not gesturing, you can put them down. Now, I didn't practice that for this video, so I don't know what my safe spot is, which is why I keep just creating random gestures. So I can now ask my cameraman, does it look natural when I put my hands like this? Is this my safe spot? Not really. I'm ready to go into a fight. Maybe this is more natural. So when I found my safe spot, I know I can keep talking without making too many movements, and I can put my hands back down in their safe spot. When you do use your hands, it's really important that you disconnect them. Not everything you do with your hands needs to be with both of your hands together. And we also want to look at specific gestures. So, for example, when you're telling a story and you're like, and then I was there in that cafe, now you've positioned that cafe on your left. And with your other hand, you might be doing something else, and it means something else. And when you go back in a story to those items, you want to reposition them in your frame. It's the same as when you would look at, by the way, recommend on Netflix, Michael McIntyre's show. I'm a really big fan of Michael McIntyre's. He's a comedian. I don't look at many comedians, but Michael McIntyre is just a blast. When you look at him walking over the stage and doing his show, when he goes to a hotel, when he talks to his kids, everyone has a spot on the stage in his storyline because we need to look at the space so that we can actually get it. I recommend you watch it and that you look at what he does because there's some great public speaking skills there, obviously. So we want to pick a safe spot for our hands and our gestures. We want to disconnect our hands and we want to use specific gestures for specific things we are doing. We also want to avoid too much jewelry because earlier in this talk, I clinked my watch to the table and I could hear it. I'm pretty sure my mic didn't pick up on it, but it easily would get picked up in a less professional setting. And I wouldn't be wearing bracelets right now, for example, because then that would get annoying, even just like to my own ears. So avoid too much jewelry. Pause in between ideas. That's also really important, and that is super uncomfortable. And pausing isn't just necessary in a video, it's also necessary in a sales conversation. When you're pitching your sale at the end of a conversation and you pitch your price and you're like, this is what you're going to get, then you shut up. Dare to pause. Practice pausing in talking is really important. I struggle with that sometimes. I know I can do it on stage, but I struggle with it online because I got so used to creating Instagram stories where everything needs to go fast that you don't pause. But in an actual long format video or in a podcast, it's nice when people get some space to really let things sink in and so that you can make your point as any great public speaker would do. Sit still. I could be shuffling about the entire time right now, but that would be very annoying for you. So I have my safe spot for my hands. My feet are locked to the floor. They were crossed, but I should actually just position them locked to the floor and not wiggle. You might think it looks awkward, same as when you're standing and you just like keep your hands next to yourself. But you are the only person who knows it's awkward. No one else sees that, okay? It's more awkward if you're doing this the entire time. I just saw a show on Belgian television and I saw an actor doing this the entire time. And I was like, I was very annoyed looking at it. And it comes across as being very insecure if you're doing that the entire time, right? Back to the safe spots. Prepare your open and close. I know when I don't do that for any story or my podcasts, I mess up the beginning, I mess up the end. It makes me feel a lot more uncomfortable about my entire show. And when when you're creating a video or a live, for example, what I'll do is I'll have a list with my outline. Like I have a list here, and I'll have like intro, outro, and in the middle I'll have some bullets for what I'm talking about. But the intro and outro need to be really clear. For example, for me, that means I need to know my call to action, I need to know which number of the episode it is, and I need to know my intro story and what the end, like the call to action is, but also like the recap of my episode. In between, I can go off track and whatever, but I always need to come back to whatever it is we're actually talking about, like right now, getting confident enough to be on camera and getting some camera tips. So you need to know your open and close and some bullets in between. But you also want to be spontaneous. And that means that you don't want to come across as super rigid, and you want to know what you're talking about and have your talking points, but you don't want to learn your text by heart because people will feel it. In fact, the more emotion and the more spontaneity and facial expressions and all of this you can bring into it, the more appealing it will be for people to listen to you. When you think you're going over the top, you're not going over the top. And that's something I learned at that public speaking training. We had to do imitations of characters, like read a text and read it like a little girl and really imitate those people, or read it like a football coach would read it. And you have to go very much overboard before it actually becomes ridiculous that you're playing that role. It almost never really gets ridiculous. So dare to go over the top. It's the same with dancing. Really heighten it. One of my few last tips are about content clarity, and I'll recap all of the tips later. But you don't want to get too specific, and that means I don't mean by being specific, like not dive deep into it, but be specific in terms of when I'm talking about business. Sometimes about online business, I'll use terms that no one gets. That's not good. I should always, I'm not saying dumb it down, but like keep it simple so everyone can follow along. And the way I like to do that is by explaining something and then using a lot of metaphors so people really know what I mean. So, for example, when I talk about smiling into the camera, giving the example like when you pass someone on the street, you would be smiling to them as well or at them as well. That makes sense for people and they have a visual they can lock it into what I said. And there's obviously a lot more to that, but it's like if you have a budgeting podcast, you might know a lot about budgeting and a lot about finances. You might know a lot more than people actually need to know, so it's up to you to make it simple for your audience. I actually have one of my clients who has a budgeting podcast, so shout out to my clients. And then an open posture instead of closing. Same as in any conversation. If I would be recording the podcast like this the entire time, it would seem very defensive. It would seem like I'm like creating a wall between you and me. And we don't want that. Actually, a table can already be a limit, but you just definitely want to make sure you keep your posture open instead of closed. So for me, that means even when I have my safe spot for my hands, I'll already be looking at, is that open enough or am I closing up too much? And you will feel that when you start retreating in the conversation, when you feel very uncomfortable, you get a fight or flight response. And that could easily be you retreating like this or you going forward to fight. So that posture, that open posture is very important. Yeah, I guess those were a lot of tips. I'm going to recap them for you. I'm also going to look at my team to ask how many minutes we're into this episode because I have no clue. 20 minutes on the spot. I am acing this. I wanted to create a short and sweet episode for you. So to recap, we want to smile into the camera because imagine if I weren't smiling at you, you would hear it in my voice. We want to focus on one spot, like I've been doing the entire time. By the way, if you're listening to the podcast, you can go and look at this video on YouTube to see more of my ways of explaining this with like some hand gestures. We want to pay attention to our facial expression. We want to use our hand gestures adequately, but not too much. Not entirely like I did in this episode. We want to avoid too much jewelry because then we will make too much noise. We want to pause in between ideas. That's important to build up some suspense. And we want to sit still. And right now I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable because I might have not prepped my outro as well. So then I start wiggling. No. Gotta stick to my safe spot. Prepare your open and close. Know it by heart, but in the middle of your content and for everything, make sure you are still being spontaneous. Have content clarity and don't go into too specific like terms of your profession, but make it simple enough for everyone to understand. I recommend using some metaphors for that. And have an open posture instead of closing yourself up for your audience. Okay? And as I said, I created this new training for you, the Spot On Stories. I really hope you go and download that, look at that, because it's going to be very valuable to you. This might feel very intimidating, but if you know that it's really important to get on Instagram stories, to start building up that audience, to start captivating people with what you're doing, be it with your face or not, what I want to say is if you feel uncomfortable about that, I'm going to help you to get comfortable with it. These were very practical tips. In that training, I'm also going to teach you how to get more confident doing that, how to feel more comfortable and feel less intimidated. So go to fastforwardamy.com/spot on stories or /56 to find everything from this episode, the recap, the tips, and all the resources I mentioned. Okay? Talk to you next week. Next week, in fact, I will be back with, let me check it out. Next week, I'll be back with an episode about finance, and I'll talk you through some personal finance things I went through and what I learned from some of my favorite finance books. Okay? Talk to you next week, Tuesday. Have a happy day.